Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see you all, not visually, of course, but knowing that you're there on this webinar. It's so nice to be able to talk to people without having a mask on. This is the Coalition for Civil Freedom's 7th weekly webinar in a series designed to highlight our mission statement. The mission statement is to defend civil liberties, to promote a fair U.S. criminal justice system, and to advocate for the rights of political prisoners in the war on terror. And right now we are advocating for over 200 political prisoners and their families, most of whom are Muslim. My name is Steve Downs, and I am today's moderator. I was with CCF when it was founded 10 years ago and was CCF's executive director for a time before my present job as chair of CCF's board of directors. Today's webinar takes a look at Islamophobia in the US military. And I want you to know that you will be able to ask questions of the panelists. If you want to do so, there's a question and answer part of Zoom, and you can write a question on that or on the chat, and it will be posted up here so that I can read them off and ask the panelists questions as we go along. So coincidentally, today is June 26. It is the UN Day of Support for Victims of Torture. When we think of victims of torture, it is impossible not to think of Guantanamo, that bleeding open wound on the honor of America. Our first panelist, James Yee, spent time at Guantanamo, and we will be talking to him about his experience there. We will also talk to Sergeant Affraz Mohammed about his experience with Islamophobia in the Marines, and with Sergeant Lourdes Loyola about her experience in the Army. So with that said, I'm going to begin with James Yee. James Yee is a graduate of West Point and a former captain in the US Army. In 2001, he was commissioned as one of our nation's first Muslim chaplains. After 9/11, he was assigned to be chaplain at Guantanamo, where he had to confront the issue, the reality of abuse and torture head on. And he paid a steep price for his courage, as he will describe. Eventually, the charges against him were dropped, and he received an honorable discharge in 2005. He is the author of several books, For God and Country and Faith and Patriotism Under Fire, and he has been featured in documentaries and articles. So James, are you there? Oh dear. I guess he's not on yet. In that case, we will go to the next person.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, there he is. Hi, James.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. I can hear you fine.
All right, great.
Tell us a little bit about the conditions that you found at Guantanamo and what your mission was, what you found, and then what happened to you after that.
Okay, so I was the Muslim chaplain assigned to Guantanamo. I served in the U.S. Army as a Muslim chaplain. I came on active duty as a Muslim chaplain in January of 2001, about 9 months prior to 9/11. But after 9/11, my role as a Muslim chaplain became very prominent. And subsequently then, I was selected to be the chaplain down at what we know as Gitmo. But even before going down to Guantanamo, I had read in the news a lot of information that to me were telling signs that there were misunderstandings and Islamophobia down at the naval base in this prison operation at Guantanamo. I read in the news things like when the prisoners at Guantanamo were making their prayers, they used their towels to fashion turbans to put on their heads during their prayers, and the guards would come and knock them off with the butt of their rifles. There was an interview conducted by a female soldier who made the comment that, well, these individuals being held in Guantanamo, they control the women in their countries, but now I'm the woman guard here at Guantanamo and I'm controlling them. You know, things like that. I also read about how the doctors, when they performed their medical examinations on the prisoners at Guantanamo, that they included some female doctors And I recall also seeing in the media quotes from some of the female doctors who didn't understand some of the Muslim practices. And one of them was, for example, the Muslim prisoners at Guantanamo, out of what they felt was respect to her as a woman, would not look at her directly in the eye, but she took it as an insult. In the Western culture, when you don't look at someone in the eye, you feel as if they're not paying attention to you or being disrespectful. So there was a misunderstanding there about cultural practices, and in this case, the opposite sides of the spectrum. And she would go on record saying that when these prisoners didn't look at her in the eye, she felt as if they were saying to her that she was some type of poison, something to that extent. So even before going down to Guantanamo, I had saw that there was definitely a need for some education about Islam and Muslim practices, and that was something I thought I could really contribute when I got the assignment.
So how did you do that? How did you go forward with your mission down there as you saw it?
Actually, one of my direct supervisors, I got it approved, for example, to have a small fact sheet about Islam posted every month on the soldier bulletin board. It would just be a few general facts about Islam. Maybe it started off with what the 5 pillars of Islam is, the types of things that Muslims believe in, what makes a Muslim, the prayer 5 times a day, the fasting, things like that. So that soldiers themselves could have a better understanding and learn a little bit about Islam in the course of their duty, in the course of carrying out their job as guards to these prisoners. But interestingly enough, after about 2 months, higher echelon officers ordered my supervisor to have me take those information sheets down, and that some people at the higher level found it inappropriate to educate the soldiers on Islam, which in my view actually would have was working to make them better soldiers, but to better take care of the prisoners down at Guantanamo. So that was one thing that I tried to institute.
Did there come a time when you spoke out about some of the abuses you saw down there?
Well, no doubt there were abuses in the very early stages of Guantanamo, and I was down there within the first 2 years of the operation. I mean, it's been almost 20 years now that this place has been in operation with prisoners down at Guantanamo, and at the time there were almost 700 prisoners at Guantanamo. But there was a lot of rampant abuse that was occurring not only in the interrogation rooms, but also in the cell blocks on the hands of the guards, in the interrogation rooms on the hands of the military and federal interrogators. But one of the things that I had come to learn was how the operation used religion as a weapon to try and break the prisoners down. So within the cell blocks, for example, during the prayer times, the guards would turn off the water that each cell in the cell block had like a small water fountain where prisoners could drink from, or use that water to wash before prayer. So when it came time for prayers, the guard force would turn off the water to prevent the prisoners from being able to wash religiously properly before prayer, and that caused some tensions, things like that. Within the interrogation room, they used religion as a weapon to try and break the prisoners down in hopes that it would somehow persuade or garner the prisoner to give up some type of information while they're being interrogated. And I'll just give one quick example. They used the Quran. There were many media reports in the past about how the Quran was being desecrated at Guantanamo. One of the places where this took place was in the interrogation room, where the Quran, interrogators would often take the Quran, which is considered, the holy book of Islam, the literal words of God to Muslims in Islam, and the interrogators would take the book and they would throw it on the ground, or they would kick it They would step on it. They would sit on it in front of the shackled prisoner, who they knew would get riled up. And in fact, this would have an opposite effect, in it would result in mass protests throughout the prison cell blocks when these things occurred, and it actually hindered the intelligence gathering process. And I was actually then later called upon to help try and rectify the situation.
Did you see a sort of a conflict eventually developing between your role as a chaplain and your role as a military officer?
I wouldn't say a conflict of interest, because by military doctrine, my primary role as a chaplain was to provide religious support and counsel to the prisoners. It actually, by military doctrine, I provide the religious support to not only military service personnel, but to anyone who would be employed on a military installation, and then also to anyone who might be a prisoner or incarcerated in a military prison situation. And so that was exactly the situation that I was in down in Guantanamo. So my primary role was to ensure that the prisoners at Guantanamo had what we would consider freedom of religion, the free exercise of worship, and that's what I advocated for. Even though the president at the time, President Bush, had said that the Geneva Conventions didn't apply in Guantanamo, and that was somewhat hindering, when trying to carry out, my mission according to U.S. military doctrine.
Now, did there come a time when you were arrested, and could you just describe what happened then?
Yeah, so as an advocate for prisoner rights and for religious freedom of prisoners, somehow that would later be translated into me being a terrorist sympathizer, since all the prisoners in Guantanamo were considered terrorist suspects, when we know that by and large the mass majority of the prisoners in Guantanamo had nothing to do with terrorism. And essentially, at the time when I was in Guantanamo, I would say that not a single prisoner at the time in Guantanamo when I was there had any involvement with terrorism, because the fact was that anyone who had been picked up by the U.S. military for terrorist crimes were, at that time in 2003 and 2002 when I was there, not being held in Guantanamo, but were being held in secret CIA black sites. So, I make the claim that not one prisoner was in actuality a terrorist when I was at Guantanamo. But somehow my advocacy for prisoner rights translated into me being a terrorist sympathizer or a terrorist myself. Even then, I was labeled a Chinese Taliban, and that would later get me arrested. I was thrown in prison for 76 days. I was taken to solitary confinement and held in the Consolidated Naval Brig down in Charleston, where my rights also, even as a U.S. citizen, as a U.S. military member, were grossly violated, subjected to solitary confinement. My religious rights as a Muslim prisoner, even as a U.S. citizen in a military prison, were violated, and in some sense, and in some cases, the way I was treated was even worse than how prisoners at Guantanamo were being treated.
How were the charges finally resolved?
Yeah, to make a long story short, eventually, once I was arrested, people at the highest levels of our government, I assume, started asking the questions. What did Chaplain Yee do? What did I do to get myself thrown in prison? And when the information, I believe, that was being passed up was that I had essentially objected to the abuses and the violations, which I saw as potential war crimes, were being reported. I was reporting those, and when that information came out, essentially people, I believe, in the higher positions of power said, this was a gross miscarriage of justice on their part in putting me in prison. So all the charges would eventually be dropped, and they were very harsh charges that I was initially accused of. Spying, espionage, aiding the enemy. They talked about charging me with treason. Giving me the death penalty. I mean, the charges that I just named are capital offenses that you can be put to death for. So eventually, all these charges would be dropped. I was let out of solitary confinement. I was returned to Fort Lewis, Washington, where I had been deployed from to Guantanamo, reinstated as a chaplain. My record was quite clean, but after that ordeal, I found it fit to tender my resignation, and I received an honorable discharge. And by separating from the military, allows me the opportunity to speak out against the injustices that occurred down in Guantanamo while I was there, and also the injustices that occurred to me in my own personal fight for justice.
James, I just want you to know that as when I first found out about your case many years ago, you've always been a hero of mine. You met all of this incredible, overwhelming abuse with such dignity. And I think I remember particularly that dignity that you had. And it really, it touched me very deeply and very, very inspirational. I think for anybody in that situation to be that calm and focused and be able to respond as you did is very, very impressive. But I'm sure it took a huge emotional toll on you. Could you just describe a little bit of what that experience was like, that emotional toll?
I'm sure there were a lot of emotions, especially when I was very excited when I went down to Guantanamo. I was uncertain what would happen, but I did, like I mentioned, think that I could contribute positively, even if it was educating other people about Islam and helping fellow U.S. military personnel be better at their jobs down at Guantanamo. But when they threw me in prison, of course, this was, shortly after 9/11. It was this time when seemingly that the rules didn't apply. I mean, I saw how prisoners were being treated. I saw them shackled. I saw them subjected to what's known as sensory deprivation, where they had goggles put over their eyes or blindfolds put over their eyes and goggles over the ears to prevent them from hearing and seeing. And when they threw me in prison, when they transported me down to the Consolidated Naval Brig down in Charleston, they subjected me to that same treatment. And knowing the situation that I was in, there was fear, there was worry. I feared for my life. I didn't know what could happen. The fear that I could myself be held in prison indefinitely without charge. So, sure, it was lots of emotions that went through my mind, that went through my life at that time. And then, of course, just serving down in Guantanamo and seeing a lot of the abuses, a lot of the persecution, not only to the prisoners, but to myself. The Islamophobia down at the naval base within the operation that other Muslim service personnel were exposed to, as well as American Muslim personnel who were serving down there. And there were a lot because of the linguistic needs that needed to be met. Most all of those linguistic cultural needs were being taken up by American Muslims, both civilian and military, down in Guantanamo. So a lot of them also had experiences being subjected to discrimination for being Muslim.
How do you think this experience has influenced what you've done since then? Could you just briefly touch on that? Because you've done some interesting things.
Yeah, I mean, I had hoped to be a career officer. I'm a West Point grad, and when I left the military, active duty the first time, it was to deepen my knowledge and understanding of Islam as a convert Muslim, and that led to me becoming one of our nation's first Muslim chaplains. And then once I came back on active duty as a Muslim chaplain, I had it set out that I would make it a career, and actually hope that perhaps one day I would be the first Muslim chaplain to attain the rank of say, lieutenant colonel. But after Guantanamo, those plans were derailed. I end up after leaving the military becoming a published author. So I documented my experience in a book entitled "For God and Country: Faith and Patriotism Under Fire." I became a public speaker. Still during the tail end, the second term of President Bush, where Guantanamo was still such a huge issue, and lectured about Guantanamo and human rights, civil liberties, And then further on, I even delved a little further into the American political system, where I then advocated for then Senator Barack Obama when he ran for president, because as a constitutional law expert, I believed he had the necessary expertise to close Guantanamo down, and advocated and became a delegate for him in 2008 when he ran for president. And I learned a little bit more about the American political system, to the extent that I was elected in Washington State as a delegate to a primary presidential candidate.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I want to bring in now our next panelist and introduce Sergeant Affraz Mohammed, who has served in the Marine Corps for 7 years. He was so outstanding as a Marine that he was selected to participate in Bush's inaugural as a driver, protecting high-ranking military officers and congressional leaders. But after 9/11, Affraz's Muslim religion caused the Marine Corps to cast him as an enemy. They tried to remove him with false charges. Affraz, tell us how that happened. Can you describe what actually happened? Here you were going along as the ideal career officer in the Marines, and all of a sudden the roof falls in on you. What happens?
I was an enlisted, Steve.
Oh.
So pretty much what happened was another Marine was an informant for NCIS and ATF, and decided to sell me a weapon, which was not illegal or anything, especially in Virginia and in Quantico. That's normal procedures that military members do. And I was arrested, mentally and physically abused by a ATF and NCI agent. They placed a gun close to my head. I could smell the gun barrel. I could look. I glanced inside of there. I seen the long, dark barrel of a weapon, and from there, it just traumatized me very bad, and it still haunts me still today.
Did they take you outside the system of the normal military justice?
Yes, they did. They did not put me in the brig where where all active duty military people are normally kept. They took me to Alexandria County Jail, where certified people that they say are terrorists and was accused of being terrorists. And I was in jail with those people. And there, ATF agents would mentally and physically torture me. They gave me no food, no water, no phone calls. I didn't get to talk to a lawyer. Nobody knew where I was at. No pillows, no blankets. I was even, assaulted, with a cavity check and things like that.
What was it that they wanted from you? What were they trying to get from you?
What they wanted me to do is confess, and it'll be over with if I just confess and say I was a terrorist. And all I had to do was sign the document saying I was a terrorist and I was going to kill other Marines and civilians in Quantico.
And this was this whole operation was being run by the ATF folks?
ATF was in charge of it, and NCIS, yes.
All right. And how did the Marines respond to this? I mean, this is a kind of an unusual thing where an outside agency comes in and starts to try to set up one of their own Marines.
Right. Pretty much, the Marines was also blindsided because when NCIS is involved, what they do is they keep certain things away from the command in case the command has a bias towards someone. And what they did was they decided to run with this operation on their own. And it was a good thing because the Marine Corps is the one that came and got that sent back NCIS to come and get me from the horrific treatment, that I was receiving, being it was like I was a POW, a prisoner doing wartime. And I don't know how long, only Allah knows, and the ATF agents and NCI agents, how long I would have been in prison as I speak. Because if it wasn't for the Marine Corps sending back NCIS agents to come and get me, I don't know how long I would have been there.
In other words, you're really outside the control of the Marines at that point.
Yes, I was.
Yeah. So eventually you were brought back in. Did you get a lawyer? Were you able to talk to a lawyer about these charges?
They brought me back on base. They took about 2 months.
When did they bring you back? How long were you off the base?
For 2 days.
2 days.
Yes.
And then they brought you back.
They brought me
And then,
back, and they decided to go ahead and put me in this platoon that they play games with everybody who's pending court martials or waiting to go to trial. So during that time, there was this one gunnery sergeant. You know, he would try to break me because they had no charges on me. I did nothing wrong, but what they was trying to do is make me lose it. And this gunnery sergeant, he would make me go pick up pubic hairs and report him and give him accountability of how much I picked up a day. I would be filling sandbags with a teaspoon. I would be cutting grasses with the scissors. I'd be toothbrushing the hallway. Other Marines, you know, the one Marines that knew me, they was like, stay motivated. You know, people would go ahead and say, hey, they just trying to break you. They ain't have nothing on you. So it had Marines that believed me, but their hands were tied because, you know, they also had career and, you know, they wanted to stay out of it.
all right. So what eventually happened after that? Did you have given a choice as to whether to go to a court martial or not, or plead guilty?
Oh yes, they gave me a choice. At first I was going to be busted down to E3 and get kicked out the Marine Corps with a bad conduct discharge. I said, okay, you know what? I was fed up of taking the abuse. You can only take so much. And all of a sudden, I was going to take that choice they gave me. And after 63 days, they decided to go forth with a court martial, and they decided to charge me on the 63rd day of possession of a fully automatic weapon. And then that's when they gave me a lawyer. The first lawyer, he said, hey, we have a good case here. It's called entrapment. Don't worry about it. This is an easy win, but we're going to have to put some work into it. And before the day of the trial, he decided to change his mind and said, hey, you need to plead guilty. We have no chance here. So I got up in the day of the trial, and I told the judge this, and I fired him. Well, she fired him on the spot for me after she reached to his boss and explained the situation. They gave me another lawyer, and he said hey, the Marine Corps, he said the Marine Corps slash the institution, the other institution messed up, and what they're trying to do is cover their tracks. And what the Marine Corps was trying to do is you know, the military follows orders. So what they was doing, they was following orders to go ahead and clean up this mess that NCIS and ATF created. So
just so I understand the situation, ATF had come in and essentially entrapped you by trying to get you to buy this gun, and then turned around and said it was an automatic gun, which was illegal. Is that right?
Yes.
But then
correct.
later they realized that they had a problem. They sent you back to the Marines. The Marines didn't know what to do with you. So eventually you ended up with a court martial with a new lawyer, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And what did the new court martial show? Which I think is amazing.
So, yeah, the new court martial, I was found unanimously not guilty on all charges from other Marines, and you know, which was shocking because at that time, E4, E5 and below, it's hard to be found not guilty in a court martial in the military because a lot of us have no shot, and it's not that court system is not there set up properly for innocent people or people that makes mistakes.
Right. And what was the basis of the finding that the gun wasn't illegal to begin with? It wasn't an automatic, but it was a semi-automatic?
Yes. So what happened was the ATF agents, they submitted 2 different serial numbers in you know, as evidence. The agents, ATF agent, NCIS, they said they had recordings of me making statement that I was going to kill Marines. It was logged in as evidence, but before the trial started, all the audio and video got lost.
So, all right, now you get through and they gave you an honorable discharge, right? All charges dropped, honorable discharge. How did this affect you psychologically?
Well, psychologically, it affected me in numerous of ways. I mean, I lost the best family of my life, you know, the Marine Corps. You know, they stopped trusting me. You know, at the end of the day, everybody, you know, they had like, they didn't look at me like I was the Marine that they knew. So that took a big toll on me, and it affects me still today. I mean, my career was stripped away from me. You know, these law enforcement was never held accountable for the abuse that they did to an innocent person and many other innocent people. So it's an ongoing battle psychologically.
Have you been heard it described as post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yes, that's what I am diagnosed with.
Yeah. So And what have you been doing since then?
Well, I've been trying to get myself together. You know, I go around, I talk in groups and stuff like that. I talk to people at the VA, other veterans. You know, they hear about my story. It gave them hope. You know, I went to a retreat. I talked to other veterans who opened up. Even I had some vets that are special forces that when they heard my story and they listened to me, they even opened up about their horrific experience behind the enemy line, and they was very supportive of me, and they even thanked me for, you know, being able to share what had happened to me. So.
Well, thank you very much. I have to say what happened to you is horrific, and I'm just astonished at the whole story. How common do you think this is? Is this a very, very unusual case, or are there other cases like it?
No, this is very common, but a lot of Muslims or even regular enlisted men and women, they'll take the plea deal, you know. So it's there. It's always been there, and it looks like sometimes when they make up stuff or if they don't like you, you just want to hurry up and get it over with, because when the longer you stay in, the more worse it could become.
All right, so I want to move on to our third panelist. I'd like to introduce Sergeant Lourdes Loyola, who has been serving in the Army for the last 11 years, I believe. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Yes. She was born in Mexico City. She came to the U.S. undocumented when she was 4 years old. She joined the Army in 2009 and received her citizenship after finishing basic training. She rose to become sergeant and commands a unit that specializes in transportation of equipment. Her unit has always received high marks for efficiency and capability, I believe. In 2015, she converted to Islam and began wearing her hijab full-time in uniform in 2018. Since then, she has been red flagged as a troublemaker and threatened with demotion and transfer. Are those facts basically correct?
Yes, except the rank, I'm a staff sergeant, but yes.
Oh, staff. I wonder what that extra S was. I'm not an expert on this, but good. First of all, just quickly tell us how you came to convert to Islam. I think it's an interesting, your whole story is fascinating, by the way. You have a very, very interesting story, but tell us how you came to convert to Islam.
It actually started when the new election a couple years ago began. And I'm actually friends, very close friends with someone who's Muslim as well. He was a Marine, then he joined the Army, very amazing man. And all I really knew about him and his religion was that he didn't eat pork. And that was pretty much the extent of all I knew about Islam. But through his character, I knew that his religion couldn't possibly be a bad religion. And I'm in the time of social media, right? So during that time, a lot of people started talking very bad and very boldly about Islam and Muslims. And I'm thinking about my brother, and I'm like, you know, that's not at all who he is. I know that that's not the religion that he represents. And not only am I what Allah would consider a social justice warrior, I also like to present facts. You know, I'm a very factual person. And so in attempts to, you know, defend my brother's religion, I wanted to do so with facts. So I started to pick up the Quran, you know, I started reading the Quran, just trying to get as much information as I could. And during that time, I had already distanced myself from my previous religion, which was Catholicism. And Islam just fit perfectly with everything that I was missing in my previous religion and things that I didn't even know I needed in a religion. Islam is based a lot on science, on women's rights, on just so many facts that a lot of people don't know. And that's really what attracted me to the religion.
It's been my observation that many, if not most, Americans are quite ignorant about Islam. They simply don't understand it, and they've sort of absorbed a lot of stereotypes. Have you found this to be a problem as a Muslim woman in the military?
Of course I have. I think that the issue is that we have been force-fed a false narrative through the media. And unfortunately, even through our own military, I don't think that they have done enough to fix and rectify that issue that the media has portrayed. You know, the only thing that media does is portray all the negative things, you know, the things that is pretty much going to sell on television, right? Which is terrorism. Nobody wants to post about the Muslim service member who has been in the military for 11 years, but they will be very fast to post, oh, hey, someone committed a crime and he's Muslim, so let's just say he's a terrorist. So that's the agenda that's continuously being pushed day after day. We see it with, you know, beginning 9/11 and on. That's all that really anybody has ever known. And what saddens me as a U.S. citizen is that we are a first world country, and we have all this information at the tip of our fingers with our phones, with all of our devices that we have. So we choose to be ignorant. I'm not asking everybody to know everything about Islam. However, there's no reason anymore. There's really no excuse of why you don't know what Islam really is. At least, you know, just the basics of it.
Right. Now, there came a time when you started to wear the hijab on your uniform, which I think you're permitted to do, right? This is
Yeah, we actually have
just
to
accommodation.
we have to put in a request in order to wear a hijab. So, you know, let's say somebody just doesn't want to do their hair and they put it on. That's not how it works. You know, you actually have to get counseling statements. You have to put in your own request, a memorandum for record saying that why it is that you want to wear a hijab. What does it mean to you as a Muslim? You know, how will it affect the military? It's a long process for sure. So
Yeah.
I requested that, and I finally was able to wear my hijab and uniform.
Yeah. So prior to this, you had received all good commendations from your superiors?
Yes, I've always been a great NCO. I'm not going to shy away from that.
And your unit, I think, has always been a great unit, right?
The one previous to this one, yes, and the soldiers in my unit, everyone that I have been in charge of, they're amazing people, just soldiers all around, great people.
Now, what happened after you started to wear the hijab? Did they put a red flag on you?
So it wasn't very, you know, like, oh, she wore a hijab, let's flag her type of thing. It's definitely, so one of the things that I've noticed in the military is that it's very hard to prove that someone doesn't like you or they're discriminating against you because you're Muslim, because you're a female, because you're Mexican, whatever it may be. It's very hard. And our regulations are written in a way that protect the command team as opposed to whoever's being harassed. So it was more just little by little an accumulation of, you know, certain things here, certain things there. And then it just starts to escalate, and you can tell that people don't want to see a Muslim woman who covers at the front of the formation. You know, you start seeing why, because at the end of the day, everybody in the military, regardless of branch, we're all human beings. We all have our own biases, you know, we all have our own ideas and our own ideals that we believe in. So that still bleeds into the military. We can't say, oh, I came into the military and now I don't believe that these people are bad and these are bad. You know, people come in with these ideologies, and oftentimes it's your commanders, it's your superiors, you know, it's your NCOs. So what happens is that regardless of how good of an NCO I am, people still don't want to see me at that front of the formation. They don't want to see that I'm the one that's leading the entire unit, you know, as an NCO. So little by little things start happening that start removing me from those positions, you know, start making me, or attempt, because thankfully to this day, you know, there's nothing that anyone can say that I've done incorrectly. So just attempts to make you look bad and keep removing you from those positions until, like the other panelists have said, you get tired of it, you know. So it's either you stay and you're struggling the entire time, or you say, you know what, fine, I'm just leaving. I'll give you what you want and I'll leave.
And what are your consequences for you? What are you planning or looking at?
Right now, I don't know. I'm pretty much being left in the dark in regards to what administrative actions are going to be taken against me. And I don't think I can get in too much detail into everything that's going on. However, I really don't know. That's where I'm at. And that's what I say when in regards to the regulations, that's allowed to leave the soldiers, you know, in a blind spot or in the dark. So I've been like this for the last 2.5 years, where I haven't been able to promote, you know, and I've gone amazing NCOERs, which are our annual evaluations. saying that I'm a great NCO and I do so much for even other units outside of my command. And even with all of that, I'm still pending an adverse action, and I don't even know what to fight. You know, I don't know what I'm fighting. I don't know what allegations or what I'm going to be looking at in regards to administrative action.
All right. I see there's a question here for James Yee. James, are you there? Oh, we have to get him to unmute himself. Oh, maybe I have to do it. Let's see. Can I do it? James?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are unmuted. Someone wrote in, oh, and I guess it's actually for probably, I'll throw it out to all three of you. And the question came in from Joachim Kotler. Is there anything that can be done to hold these federal agents accountable? I'll start with you, James.
Yeah, I have a somewhat of an answer. In the
All right.
U.S. military, when the military prosecutes you or when the military comes after you, the service member has legal obstacles that prevents him or her from, for example, suing the military. From my understanding, there's a legal doctrine known as the Ferries Doctrine, like F-E-R-E-S, from a case where someone in the military attempted to sue the military for some wrong. But the courts have generally held that it's not in the interest of the U.S. military to subject them to liabilities and basically prevents the military from being sued. So for example, in my case, everything happened to me while I was in the military. So I really had no grounds to sue anyone. One of the examples I give is my younger brother. He served as an army doctor, and he's an OBGYN. So he helps deliver babies. And OBGYNs in the civilian sector have some of the highest medical malpractice insurance rates on the books. But when he was in the U.S. military as an army doctor, serving as an OBGYN, he didn't need medical malpractice insurance because essentially he couldn't be sued, and neither could the military, even if he had made a mistake somehow, you know, in the conduct of his job as a physician. So
right, and that's very similar to
legal obstacles in the military.
Right, and that's very similar to the situation with police. They have limited immunity, and it's really hard to sue them also for the same reasons. Affraz, you had a situation where you had another federal agency that came in here and basically brought false charges against you. So you wouldn't actually be suing the military, you'd be sort of going after agents in another agency. Have you ever looked into that? Can they be held in any way, or could a complaint be filed, or could they be disciplined by their own agency for what they did?
Well, in the past, I have reached out to other agencies, and you know, I didn't get anywhere. Every time I try to, you know, put in a complaint or something, it was like, okay, we'll look into it. It's over with. You know, they'll just brush me off, and that's what I'm hoping to find out, to start holding these people accountable for, you know, how, you know, bothering people with their everyday life. They can't just keep on going around hurting people mentally, physically, and abusing them and just think, okay, we're just doing our job, we're going to leave from here. So I'm looking and hoping to find a lawyer that's going to start helping me with these things, to go after these kind of individual and institution that's want to keep on bullying people.
And I see somebody else is following up that question. Did anybody lose their job as a result of the debacle? Were there any repercussions for anybody other than you? Affraz?
Oh, me?
Yeah. Was there any repercussions for anyone, that anyone lost their job or was disciplined in any way?
Oh no, not nobody, and that's what I can't understand. But you know, like I said, they need to make changes even inside the military with law enforcement and outside, because a lot of people career And people, and a lot of veterans and military members will lose their life and take their own life because of things like this. So it's a bad place to be for any young military members and veterans.
Yeah. Sergeant Lourdes, what do you do? Where do you go when somebody is acting improperly? I mean, do you have any recourse, any way to get accountability?
Unfortunately, it's through your own chain of command, and that's, I can't imagine being a private, a brand new private in the military as a Muslim, because everything that I have, all the actions that I've taken now are based off my experience, my 11 years of experience. I do see a lot of people that this happens to. They're brand new to the military. They don't know where to go and don't know what the steps to take. For us and the complainant, that is making these allegations and the complaints, there's a lot of things that we have to follow. You have to follow everything in detail, step by step. And if you miss one thing, if you miss one chain of command, then you're pretty much done, because you didn't follow chain of command, even if your complaints are valid. So I've been able to follow my entire chain of command and even go outside of the military. So I fortunately, I think now more than ever, unfortunately for my brothers here, now there's a lot more resources for us. I am fortunate also to have resources in the Hispanic and Latin community and not just within the Muslim community. So I've been able to reach outside of the Army for some legal representation as well.
Good. All right, but that's still, there's no inspector general in the military or some office that's there to take complaints.
Yeah, there is. And that's where I say that I think that for me, it's still in the military. That's where we need to focus on, is the policies and regulations need to change, where we're not continuously going to the same people that still have to protect the command team. So me presenting my complaint to an inspector general, at the end of the day, it's still going to go back to the same command, and they're going to say, okay, here's our findings, because all the inspector general is, they're fact finders. And I've been told this time and time again, that's all they are, fact finders. At the end of the day, when all of this is done, they take that investigation and they give it to the same command and expect them to do what's right. But what if we're complaining against that command, then what happens? So
right.
our policy,
would that be a basis to find you a troublemaker in addition for filing the complaint?
Exactly. So it's just going back to the same exact command that you may be, filing a complaint against, and it makes it a lot easier for them to say, okay, this is a troublemaker, or for them to start plotting and scheming and, putting things together to make you look bad. So you're constantly having to be on your P's and Q's, and even though you're emotionally drained, because this takes a toll on everybody, being harassed and going through the things that the panelists were saying, it takes a mental and a spiritual toll on you. So you're supposed to still give your 100% while you're going through all of this, so it's very hard. I think our policies need to change, and things are not going to change until the regulations really are looked at very well and are there to help the soldiers. And we need to stop protecting the command and really doing what's right and protecting the people that are going through all of these harassments.
Yes. You said you wanted to make some comments about things that could be done to improve the situation. Was that what you were thinking of?
That also, I think that when Muslims and really any other religious group was able to visibly serve, meaning we're allowed to wear hijab or wear things that visibly identify you as whatever religion that you are, particularly I'm going to speak on Muslims, when we were allowed to openly serve with a hijab, or allowed to have beards for our brothers, the military didn't do any training. I don't know if anybody here recalls when transgenders were allowed to openly serve in the military, we had, I don't know if you guys were part of that, but we had a lot of training. I mean, and it was great. I think that it's very much needed because a lot of people don't know what it is to be transgender, or the steps in the military that we need to take. However, when Muslims were allowed to openly serve wearing a hijab, nothing was said. There was no training in regards to the religion. And so no training plus all the misinformation from the media left us Muslims serving in the military very vulnerable, open to harassment and just things being swept under the rug. So I think that there needs to be a lot of training. And I see that the chaplain, previous chaplain, that's what he wanted to do. And I think that that's where the responsibility falls into. All of our chaplains need to be more educated, and they need to be giving out these classes in regard to Islam and what Islam really is, in order for that ignorance to start little by little going away from our ranks. And like I said, changing the policies and the regulations.
We need to bring back James Yee, right?
Yes, definitely.
I'm not coming back.
Well, don't say never. You never know. You are Lourdes. You're a role model for sure. I think we're all very impressed with what you've done. James, I'm sorry. I'd like to bring you back for just one last question, as we're running out of little time here. But this is the day to remember victims of torture.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that there have been virtually no trials at Guantanamo for almost a decade and a half, very few. And defense lawyers have said that the prosecutors there do not intend to try any of the remaining cases because they are afraid that if they do, the trials will expose the U.S. participation in, and particularly the military and political leaders, to criminal liability for the torture they authorized.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you subscribe to that theory?
I definitely think that one of the partial reasons why these no trials have gotten off the ground really is because there is some concern from the U.S. government that what happened to many of these prisoners who are set for trial happened to them in the CIA black sites. So we know from the Senate torture report and other instances where in these black sites that people were waterboarded. I mean, like very harshly, like hundreds of times, like not just waterboarded once, but like 283 times, or hundreds of times. So and something like waterboarding, there's no question as to whether or not it's torture. I mean, across the board, it's torture everywhere. Even our country has prosecuted other people for using water torture, waterboarding on someone. So we've even prosecuted people for torture of people who did waterboarding. So now that our government has done it, I'm sure there's a concern. I have no doubt that there's a concern that some people within our government do not want that and other things exposed that has happened, and to what extent these people were tortured and abused in these CIA black sites. But I mean, when you're looking 20 years later, from 9/11, and no one's been held accountable for those attacks. The people that they have in custody that are, should be on trial. This is a complete injustice in and of itself, and it's certainly not bringing any justice to anyone who was a victim of the tragic 9/11 attacks or any of the victims' families.
I've heard defense attorneys down at Guantanamo argue that if the prosecutors do not intend to try the cases and are just covering them up and refusing to move ahead with them because they're afraid of the torture, then their clients are essentially being told that they will stay in jail indefinitely for the rest of their lives, probably, without being charged, and without ever having a chance to prove their innocence. And isn't that in and of itself, particularly in a capital case, isn't that in and of itself torture? And they've argued that they feel complicit in the torture of their own clients because they cannot force the prosecutor to go ahead. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's my view that indefinite detention in and of itself can be considered a form of torture. I think even some statutes or some definitions have included prolonged solitary confinement. So being in solitary confinement for a certain amount of time constitutes a level of torture. So
Yes.
so no doubt these are issues that have to be brought to the surface.
Well, we're almost out of time, so what I'd like to do is to give you each one an opportunity for a closing thought here on the stuff that we've discussed. Why don't we go in reverse order here? Lourdes, do you have any closing thoughts about what we've talked about?
I feel like I said, I think that we still need a lot of education within the ranks. A lot needs to change, but I'm hopeful and I'm not ready to give up yet. And I'm hoping that not only myself, but, you know, we have a lot of chaplains that are Muslim now, not a lot, but, you know, we have more than we did back in the past. And people that are more open-minded, like I said. So I'm just hopeful that we can still make changes, that it's not too late, and that we fix it. There's nothing wrong with pointing out a deficiency within our ranks and also fixing it. So I'm still here fighting for hopefully myself and any future Muslims that want to join the military as well.
Thank you. I see down here in the corner, there's a little question. It says, she is a staff sergeant. Why is this not said correctly after she's corrected him? And I apologize.
No worries.
I'm so confused by military rank that I just blew right through it. And I meant no offense, so please accept my apologies.
No worries.
What is the difference between a sergeant and a staff sergeant?
I'm higher ranking.
Which is higher?
Myself. A staff sergeant is higher than a sergeant.
Well, then I definitely should be called to account because that is important to emphasize. And thank you for the question.
No worries.
Affraz, do you have any final thoughts?
My final thoughts is like everybody's been, like, you know, the staff sergeant just said that the lack of education, not just in the military but in the civilian world about Muslims. You know, we only go with negative things and we jump on that bandwagon and we go with it because it sells. So what people need to start doing is just, you know, understanding, you know, sometimes people are put in a position and negative things happen. I'm gonna give you an example. Like, for instance, with the major, with the you know, the Fort Hood shooting.
Yeah.
You know, he killed 13 soldiers and he injured 30 people. What got him there? Did he just wake up? Did he just eat breakfast and just say, hey, I'm gonna do this? So in other words, we need to go ahead and identify the problem instead of backtracking when the problem is identified and it's taken out of misbehaving people. So, you know, my thoughts is that how people need to watch their tone, treat people like human, and be more nice. And you know, just like we can go ahead and adapt to the transaction, you know, different, you know, the other military members, we should be able to do it for the Muslims as well.
All right, James?
Yeah, I think in terms of my final comments, I think one of the things that can really help address Islamophobia is not only properly educating people in general within the military ranks about Islam and the Muslim culture, but also to recognize that many Muslims have served the U.S. military, and I believe have served in every war since the time of the Revolutionary War. Muslims have served in the U.S. military in all of these wars and have made contributions. It's known that there are many Muslims that are buried in Arlington National Cemetery, and their gravestones show a crescent moon to signify that they were members of the Muslim faith. So making people aware that Muslims in America have also, as you would say, paid the ultimate sacrifice, you know, fighting in the U.S. military for our nation, and recognizing all of the contribution that American Muslims make in the military. I think it could go a long way in terms of stemming some of this Islamophobia that's abound in the U.S. military.
Yes, and I think you yourself come from a long, distinguished family of military officers, right?
Yeah, my dad who recently passed, he was a World War II veteran. He was a World War II veteran. I myself, I'm a West Point graduate. My youngest brother followed suit and also became a West Point graduate, served in the U.S. military, and then I mentioned my other brother who served as an Army doctor. All have served the ranks of the U.S. military, and but I myself am the only Muslim out of my immediate family.
Well, we appreciate all of your service and all of your stories and for being here today. I'm sorry, we have some other questions, but I'm afraid we're out of time. Before I go, I just want to talk about what we're going to do next. Next week, or no, sorry, wait a minute. Tonight, actually, excuse me, tonight we're having the first of a new video series called Faces in the War on Terror. They were filmed by Ellie Bernstein, and I have to say myself, I was a minor helper in this. And we went to Europe and we made movies of various stories concerning Islamophobia in Europe. Tonight there's going to be a particularly important video that we took in support of torture, that is, or victims of torture. It has to do with Mozambique, who was the founder of Cage in the UK, and had an extraordinary story. And he's an extraordinary individual. He's almost unknown in the US, but in the UK and all over Europe, he was a gigantic figure, a beautiful, compassionate man, tortured. He's seen everything from the inside and outside, was later reprieved by the UK in a way that the US has never done. It's an amazing story. So I hope you'll come by. It's being streamed live at 7 o'clock on Facebook. Will also be available on Vimeo and YouTube as well. And in coming weeks, we're going to have other episodes that we've shot of different people in all kinds of different situations, some involving a young child of 9 who was caught up in CVE and doesn't know whether or not he might be taken out of his family for raising a question in class about eco-terrorists. Or in another case, a man who was ended up being arrested and placed under house arrest, but nobody would tell him why. And he sat under house arrest for 6 months, lost his job. No one would explain to him why he was there. Finally, he ran away. Posters went up all over London. He was a terrorist. He was finally arrested and brought to trial, but was not allowed to question why he had been put under house arrest. And how he got out of this completely bizarre legal maze is so startling and so revealing that I think you have to see the video to say it. I don't want to be a spoiler on it. So there's some very, very interesting stories here. I hope you guys will come in and support this series, Faces in the War on Terror, films produced by Ellie Bernstein, and she's an award-winning film person. So thank you all very much. Appreciate your coming and all the testimony, and hope to see you again.